What's up, Savvy Expats? Today, we're covering the 5 struggles of moving to the Philippines for foreigners here on part 1. In our next video, we'll cover several more struggles we've experienced on part 2. As always, if you want to support the channel, that'll all be linked down below. Alright, without wasting time, let's get into it. So the first struggle to adjust to for many foreigners coming to the Philippines is the sight of poverty. If you've never left your Western country, coming across the sight of poverty may be a huge culture shock for you. Seeing things like homeless children on the street, people with no shoes or torn up clothes, and poor living conditions can be a lot to take in when landing here. For example, the first poverty shock I've experienced is when my family and I were staying in Malate for a couple of days. After getting back from a restaurant for dinner, it was already late and dark outside, and we saw a young girl by herself taking care of a baby on the street. She was in a small space between the curb and a car, trying to stay out of the public area. And so here is this sight of a baby practically taking care of another baby barely bigger than herself, and it's dark outside. And so just like us, you may do what you can to help out, but seeing things like this may be a heart-wrenching sight for some. For me, I was a bit shocked, but coming here, I already knew that this was the reality of many areas in the Philippines. And as time goes on, you just start to get desensitized to the sight of poverty because depending on where you live, you see it on a daily basis. In the country where you're from, you have the areas that are very well off, and then secluded from that is the areas that are lower class and poor. So generally, avoiding sketchy areas is pretty easy. But here in the Philippines, unless you stay in one and only one well-off area, you will inevitably come across impoverished areas. And the thing is, the wealth gap in the Philippines is so obvious. It's not like the US where you have the lower class, the majorities, and the middle class, and then you have the upper class. Because as I've mentioned in the past, even if you're staying in wealthier cities like BGC and Makati, if you take one step outside the city, it's almost as if you're in a completely different world. It's like a territory someone drew out with chalk and said, this is the upper class part and then this is the lower class part. Because as soon as you walk outside the city, you're in what you see the majority of the Philippines to be. And I'm not talking about the beaches either. So I'm just gonna give it to you guys straight. That's just what the reality is of the Philippines. You have your upper class set apart cities, subdivisions, and malls, which is divided from everything else in the Philippines. That's how the wealth gap is here. And of course, that is at least the case with crowded cities like Manila. And if you go to the provinces on the other hand, everything is much more spread out and everyone is around the same class. And speaking of wealth gap, to put it into perspective, you only need $60,000 to be part of the 1% in the Philippines. But bringing it back full circle to the sight of poverty, there's just many expats that can't handle the sight of seeing a place with prevalent poverty. And then there's still others that can get used to it and they already know what they're getting into when they move here. So yes, the Philippines is a beautiful country with many upsides to moving here, but this is just one of the honest downsides. For me personally, it was a wake-up call of life outside of the little bubble of America. Another cultural wake-up call is that every country except for us Americans can speak at least 2 different languages, but that's besides the point. Now moving on to the second struggle of moving to the Philippines for some, that is making friends. So I always talk about how Filipinos are hospitable and warm people, which they are. But for some of you guys, you may struggle with making friends when you get here. Be it language barrier, lack of things to relate to, or cultural differences, making friends may be harder. Sure, when you get here, you'll make lots of friends, but I'm not talking about that kind of friend. The kind of friends I'm talking about is very close friends you can trust. I'm talking Brennan and Dale from that movie Step Brothers. That kind of close friends. And so even for me personally, I don't have many friends here. And it's not like this, woe is me, boo-hoo, you can't make any friends because you're not social. For me, it's just hard to relate to with others. For my family, the only friends that we have here is American expat friends and a small amount of local friends that we can trust. But then again, this also has a lot to do with us preferring to keep a small circle of friends. But another reason you may have trouble finding friends is if people only want you for your money. There are many Filipinos that aren't looking just to be friends with you for your money, trust me, but there still are a ton that are. And really, this is the case with any country you go to, but even more so in the Philippines because social status is so prevalent here. There are countless people that we met here that have a genuine heart, but at the same time, there are just as much people that we choose to stay away from because they're only with us for what we can provide for them. And so there's a lot of people that only like us for financial motivations. In addition to that, it also may be hard to make friends because you can't relate to the joking here. As I've mentioned in the past, the type of joking joking here is different from the West. And so even when I hang out with a couple of people that I know here, I don't find their jokes to be funny and they don't find mine to be either. Maybe it's that, or we just all suck at making jokes. But nevertheless, the jokes here may be just something that you have a hard time relating to. And if you're like us, where you don't want a large circle of friends, but the friends you do have, you have a quality friendship with, then with time, you'll find good people that you can personally resonate with. The last reason you may find it hard to make friends here is because a lot of the people are so giddy.
I'm giddy right now.
Which is not necessarily a bad thing. Honestly, from what I've found, it's a good and a bad thing. It's nice because the people here are just happy people and you shouldn't frown upon them for being that. But to say that we all have that giddy attitude 24/7 is unrealistic. We're all humans and we all face real emotions. But it's also part of the culture to always want to save face. So any displays of confidence, boldness, aggression, and unimpression is not common here. With that being said, depending on your friend group, it's just hard to be real here. Like you and I, we may be able to have a deep conversation without having to make a joke every 2 seconds. But oftentimes, culturally speaking in the Philippines, that's not how they socialize here. Joking is constantly going on, pretending to be impressed or wowed is prevalent, and smiling 24/7 is expected of you. And I get it, the people like to be happy, but just at some point you want a friendship where you can have some sort of depth in it and you can just be real. Not all just jokes, but stuff that you can actually relate to and bond on. And so at times, I find that some people just can't be themselves. You don't have to constantly give out compliments, be impressed, beat around the bush, and be all smiley and giddy all the time. Obviously, not all Filipinos are like this, but it is part of the culture. And I think we can all agree that though these things are appreciated, it's much nicer to have someone around that is real about their emotions. And so while I do love the positivity of the Filipinos, if you're looking for a deep and real friendship, it may be harder to find. And now moving on to the third struggle for many moving to the Philippines, that is leaving friends and family behind. As you're moving to a completely different country, leaving behind your loved ones may leave you feeling lonely. Coming here to the Philippines, you may not make friends in an instant, so many expats feel alone here. No friends, no family, and no one they know. You can imagine how hard that feels. So bear in mind, if you're not coming here with your wife, family, or coming here to meet your wife, things can be bland. And if you're leaving behind loved ones, you may even feel homesick. And not to mention, imagine celebrating your favorite holidays back home, like Thanksgiving, by yourself, where you would have been surrounded by family at one big large table ready to chow down on a turkey leg. You're by yourself, lonely, eating a Jollibee drumstick. Fortunately though, for our family, we don't tend to feel homesick. We still celebrate our favorite holidays like 4th of July, Easter, Christmas, and Thanksgiving. So in my opinion, unless you're a complete loner, then experiencing this country with others makes all the difference. Now for the fourth struggle of moving to the Philippines, we have the food. I mean, I'm Filipino, so I'm used to this kind of food, but for many expats, acquiring this kind of taste may not be for you. You may not like the taste of garlic, fish sauce, and vinegar. And so while there are restaurants in major cities, in the province, not so much. So if you don't like the food here, unless you can cook for yourself, this may be a struggle point of moving here. And it's not only the cuisine here, but also the lack of healthy options. So for some of you health conscious people that like to get in your salad, veggies, and herbs, the Philippines may not be for you. The food is generally fried, meat is eaten often, and rice is a mandatory for every meal. If you want somewhere healthy and less carbs, maybe consider Thailand. But as for the Philippines, even when it comes to parties and events, healthy foods is not always available. Or when going to local carinderias, oftentimes the healthiest option you'll find is ampalaya, also called bitter melon. Other than that, there's not many other healthy foods in the cuisine that aren't barbecued and fried. There are also not many vegetarian eaters here either. On the bright side though, there are numerous healthy ingredients, so if you can cook at home, you should be fine. If you're a health fanatic, there are still a lot of vegetables and herbs here, so your best bet is to cook at home. Now for the fifth and final struggle of moving to the Philippines, that is brownouts. Hearing the word brownout was actually a shock to me, as most people in the US use the word blackout. But in most areas of the Philippines, due to any bad weather, brownouts often occur. You'll find that if it rains, storms, or thunders, your electricity may shut shut off and your Wi-Fi may slow down. One suggestion that I'll make is that you have a backup generator with you, because you can imagine if you're in the middle of showering and the lights turn off, that can be a huge pain in the butt. Or if you're watching TV and it randomly shuts off, that can be a huge annoyance. So keep in mind that brownouts are common here in the Philippines. So there you have it, savvy expats. Those are the 5 struggles of moving to the Philippines. We're only scratching the surface of the struggles that we've faced, so if you want a part 2, let's get this video to 500 likes. And I want to make it known that despite this list, I'm not saying the Philippines is a bad country. Just like any country, you have your upsides and downsides, but on this channel, we cover both sides of the coin. And so thank you for watching, savvy expats, and I'll see you in the next video. God bless.